Today, the U.S. Congress gave U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth a real public dressing down for the increase in spending on the war with Iran and the lack of a clear strategy from President Donald Trump's administration. During the hearings, U.S. lawmakers stated that they do not understand, and in general no one understands, what plans Donald Trump has for the war with Iran and how and under what conditions he intends to end it. It got to the point where Hegseth was even caught lying about the amount spent on this war. But Pete Hegseth just replied that Donald Trump definitely has some kind of plan, but he won't tell anyone exactly what it is. At the same time, it's worth remembering that Pete Hegseth was summoned to Congress for another issue. That's the record military budget of $1.5 trillion for 2027. And here the White House was in for a surprise. The chairman of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense, Republican Mitch McConnell, criticized Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for the Trump administration's questionable plans to fund key parts of the Pentagon's budget request. For example, McConnell unexpectedly stated that he doesn't really see the point in spending billions of dollars on the not entirely clear Golden Dome missile defense project. And he spoke out against the tricky defense funding scheme that Trump is pushing. I'll also tell you exactly what that is in this episode. I'm Pechiy. Let's discuss these topics together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this video, leave any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So the U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was grilled in Congress because of the rising costs of the war with Iran and the lack of a clear strategy from President Donald Trump's administration. Although the congressional hearing was specifically about the record U.S. defense budget of $1.5 trillion for next year, but we'll talk about that a little later. And so, Democratic Party Representative Rosa DeLauro stated that the Trump administration is not providing enough transparency regarding the war. According to her, the costs of the conflicts keep rising, while the ultimate goal of the U.S. remains unclear. In addition, senior Democrat on the Defense Subcommittee Betty McCollum referred to the preliminary estimate of the conflict costs at $25 billion and called on the Pentagon to, well, still provide more details. You can't just come and say, listen, we spent $25 billion on the war, that's it, we won't tell you anything else. And so she demanded explanations regarding the ammunition expended, maintenance of ships, possible equipment losses, and damage to American military facilities in the region. In addition, McCollum asked Hegseth whether the Pentagon has a plan for withdrawing or redeploying troops in case Congress does not support the continuation of military operations. In response, the head of the Pentagon stated that the U.S. has several scenarios for how events might unfold. And now I'll just give you a quote from Pete Hegseth. "We have a plan for escalation if it becomes necessary. We have a plan for withdrawal if it becomes necessary. We have a plan for redeploying resources. But I won't disclose the details, that's all." And here's where it gets interesting. Today, Reuters reports that the U.S. war against Iran has already cost Washington $29 billion. That's $4 billion more than the Pentagon estimated at the end of last month. The new spending estimate was announced by acting Pentagon Comptroller Jules Hertz during his address to American lawmakers. According to him, the updated figures include additional costs for repairs and equipment replacement as well as operational expenses. And I want to emphasize again that as recently as April 29, the Pentagon estimated the cost of the war at $25 billion. Since then, it seems that there have been practically no military actions. And it remains unclear how exactly the department arrived at the new figure of $29 billion. But still, most of the time in Congress was spent discussing the U.S. defense budget for 2027, which amounts to $1.5 trillion, making it a record-breaking defense budget. And this is where the White House was in for a surprise from an unexpected source. The chairman of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee, Republican Mitch McConnell, criticized Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth for the questionable plans of the Trump administration to fund key parts of the Pentagon's $1.5 billion budget request, as well as for alienating U.S. allies amid several major global conflicts. McConnell objected to including key Pentagon programs such as the missile defense system, Golden Dome, munitions, F-35 fighter jets, and drone production in a bill separate from the annual defense appropriations bill, the Budget Reconciliation Bill. And first, I'll quote Mitch McConnell. Political reality does not always allow the budget to be reconciled along party lines, and if the department's main priorities are not included in the annual appropriations, we are actually taking a very big risk. These key areas of work will only be effective if we provide them with a solid financial foundation. Here's where I'll explain Mitch McConnell's point. The fact is, the Donald Trump administration plans to fund the Pentagon's budget for the 2027 fiscal year by allocating $1.1 trillion as part of the traditional request for the regular defense budget. You remember the quote? The figure is $1.1 trillion, and this $1.1 trillion is allocated as the regular defense budget. You might ask, where is the rest of the money? And the rest, more than $350 billion, they want to propose through the reconciliation procedure, which allows the current Republican majority to bypass any objections from the Democrats. To put it simply, the idea is just to split the defense budget into parts and pass it through separate bills. The main part, of course, is the defense budget, then the reconciliation procedure, then some other package and another one, where basically a simple Republican majority is enough. However, McConnell stated that this approach is unreliable, considering that the Republican Party could lose its majority in the November elections. Other Republicans also expressed skepticism about the possibility of completing a third defense budget bill, and after they used their second attempt in this process to pass a bill that was only partially tailored to the specific needs of funding immigration enforcement measures. Earlier on Tuesday, members of the House responsible for budget appropriations expressed similar concerns about the structure of the defense budget when Pechiy testified before lawmakers for several hours. Additionally, what's also interesting is that Mitch McConnell also criticized President Trump for alienating traditional U.S. allies, supporting NATO, and defending Ukraine. Earlier this month, Trump announced the withdrawal of 5,000 American troops from Germany and threatened further actions amid escalating tensions with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Trump has repeatedly criticized U.S. allies for their unwillingness to confront Iran or help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, calling these countries cowards and making veiled threats to withdraw the U.S. from the NATO military alliance. And here is another quote from McConnell addressed to Pechiy. Tense relations with U.S. partners and allies only serve the interests of our adversaries and limit our capabilities and deterrence on a global scale. In this regard, I want to hear about the future strengthening of capabilities in cooperation with interested allies and partners. McConnell also made it clear that he wants the previously approved U.S. lethal aid for Ukraine to reach its destination without further delays. Mitch McConnell, let me remind you, was one of the main supporters of Congress allocating $400 million to Ukraine at the beginning of the year, criticizing the Pentagon for withholding it. And the final quote of this episode will also come from Mitch McConnell. Quote, "I want to emphasize that this is not charity. When our partners are capable of this, the deterrent effect is stronger and the risk to our service members is lower. The wars in Ukraine and the Middle East clearly show that we have something to learn from our friends." I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially by donating through the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screens. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone. To be continued.